Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to the Dark Ages to witness the terrifying power of a lost technology. A super weapon so effective and so secret that we still can't quite figure out how it worked. We're talking about Greek fire, a mysterious, sticky, liquid inferno that could burn on water and consume everything it touched. It was the napalm of the medieval world, and its recipe was the most closely guarded state secret in history. Let's be honest, you're going to be a soldier on the front lines of a medieval naval battle, so your chances of surviving this little trip without getting horribly, inexplicably barbecued are slim to none. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see you post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 674 AD, and the salt-laced wind whipping off the Sea of Marmara does little to cool the sweat that trickles down your back, collecting in the warm leather padding of your armor. You are a soldier, a scoutatos, in the army of the Eastern Roman Empire, an empire that future historians will call Byzantium. And you are standing on the greatest defensive structure in the ancient world, the Theodosian walls of Constantinople. From your perch on the outer parapet, you can see your home, the queen of cities, the envy of the world, a glittering jewel of domes and palaces. But you are not looking at the city. You and every other soldier on this wall are looking at the sea. And the sea is black with them. Ships, not a dozen, not 100, but a forest of masts and sails stretching to the horizon. This is the fleet of the Umayyad Caliphate, the new, explosive power that has erupted out of Arabia, and they have come to take your world. Their ships are dromongs, sleek, lateen-rigged vessels, and there are hundreds upon hundreds of them, a swarm of hungry locusts made of wood and canvas. Historians of the future will argue endlessly about the exact size of this fleet, with some Byzantine chroniclers claiming there were over 1,000 ships, a number that was almost certainly an exaggeration born of pure, unadulterated terror. But as you look at the seemingly endless armada, 1,000 feels about right. A deep, soul-shaking dread is settled over the city. You can feel it in the unnatural silence of the streets behind you. A silence punctuated only by the frantic, clanging peal of the alarm bells from the city's 1,000 churches. You've heard the stories of what happened to the other great cities that stood in the way of this new power. Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, they all fell. And now the tide of history is lapping at the foundations of the last, greatest bastion of the Roman world. Your armor feels impossibly heavy. The iron scales of your Larikian dig into your shoulders, and the bronze helmet pinches your temples. Your spear is slick with nervous sweat in your hand. Down below, in the Golden Horn, the city's great natural harbor, you can see the Imperial Navy making its preparations. You watch as teams of men and oxen on either side of the harbor entrance struggle with massive winches, slowly raising the great chain, a series of immense iron links that conceal the harbor from any naval assault. It's a brilliant, simple piece of defensive engineering, a quirky and incredibly effective front door lock for the city. But it won't be enough. The enemy fleet isn't trying to get into the harbor. They are preparing to land troops on the beaches just south of the city to lay siege to the very walls you now stand upon. You look at those walls, a triple line of stone and brick that has stood for 200 years, and you pray they are as impregnable as the legends say. You think of your family, huddled in your small apartment in the city's 3rd district. You think of the meager soldier's pay that is already 2 months late. And you think of the enemy, an army fueled by a faith and a fervor that has already conquered half the known world. The odds do not feel good. It feels like you've been asked to stop an avalanche with a single, slightly wobbly shield. You are a single, anonymous soldier, a footnote in a history that is about to be written in blood and fire. But you and the emperor in his palace have a secret, a new secret, a desperate, terrifying, and untested hope, whispered about in the barracks in hushed, fearful tones. It's a secret that smells of sulfur and pine resin, a secret that has been brewing in the city's darkest workshops. And it is a secret that is about to be unleashed upon the unsuspecting world. The dread on the city walls is a cold, heavy blanket. You stand your post, a single, insignificant warrior in a line of thousands, and you wait for the inevitable. But the inevitable is delayed. A gruff centurion, his face a roadmap of old battle scars, stomps his way down the line of men on the parapet. He is not looking for soldiers. He is looking for specific soldiers. He has a list, a wax tablet in his hand, and he is calling out names. And then he calls yours. A cold jolt, a mixture of fear and a strange, unwelcome pride, goes through you. To be singled out in the army is rarely a good thing. It usually means you've been volunteered for a suicide mission, or you're on latrine duty for the next month. You and 24 other men, a random assortment of grizzled veterans and terrified-looking farm boys, are pulled from the line. The centurion gives you the barest of explanations, his voice a low growl that is barely audible over the wind and the distant roar of the enemy fleet. You've been reassigned, he says. Special detail, naval service. By order of the emperor himself, you are marched away from the great land walls, down through the hushed, anxious streets of Constantinople, and towards the military harbor in the Golden Horn. The air here is thick with the smell of pitch, salt, and wet timber. You walk past the standard warships of the Byzantine Navy, the workhorse vessels known as dronos. They are sleek, fast, two-decked galleys, powered by 100 oarsmen on the lower deck and carrying a complement of marines on the upper. But you are not led to one of these. You are led to a specific ship set apart from the others that looks different. At first glance, it is a normal drono, but as you get closer, you see the modifications. On its raised forecastle, where a normal ship might have a small catapult or a detachment of archers, there is something else. A strange, menacing-looking contraption of polished bronze and thick leather pipes. It's a large cylindrical tube, maybe 10 feet long, mounted on a swivel that allows it to be aimed. It is encased in ornate bronze plating, sculpted to look like the roaring head of a lion or a mythical beast, its open mouth forming the nozzle. Connected to this are a series of leather hoses and a large, piston-like pump mechanism. It looks like a piece of industrial plumbing designed by a madman. It is both beautiful and deeply unnerving. You are ordered aboard. The deck is already crowded with a new kind of soldier, men you don't recognize from the regular army units. They are dressed in thick, quilted leather armor, and their faces are grim and secretive. They move with a quiet, professional purpose, and they ignore your presence completely. These are the Siphonario, the operators of the new weapon, an elite unit shrouded in secrecy. But it is the cargo that truly sets this vessel apart. In the center of the deck, heavily lashed down and guarded by 2 of the secretive soldiers, are a dozen large clay jars and several wooden barrels, all sealed with thick wax stoppers. A strange, acrid smell hangs in the air around them, a sharp chemical tang that cuts through the familiar odors of the sea. It smells a bit like sulfur, a bit like pine resin from the caulking, and something else, something oily and unfamiliar. One of the jars has a small, dark leak near its base, a thick, syrupy, almost black liquid oozing out and staining the deck. A deckhand moves to wipe it up, but one of the guards barks a sharp command, stopping him in his tracks. They seem more afraid of this leaking liquid than of the entire enemy fleet. Historians still argue whether the men who crewed these special ships were a permanent elite branch of the Byzantine Navy, a secretive corps of specialists answerable only to the emperor, or if they were temporary units assembled for specific campaigns from the regular ranks. As you look at the hard, closed-off faces of the men guarding the barrels, you get the distinct impression that they are part of a club you have not been invited to join. The oarsmen are ordered to their benches, and with a great groaning creak of timber, your ship casts off, part of a small, specialized squadron of about a dozen similarly equipped vessels. You are a marine on this ship, your job to defend it from enemy boarders. But you are also a passenger, a witness to the deployment of a weapon you do not understand. There has been no safety briefing, no user manual for the strange bronze lion on the bow. You are a soldier in a floating munitions experiment, and you have a very bad feeling that you are sitting on the most dangerous and unstable thing in the entire Black Sea. The ship glides out of the Golden Horn, past the Great Chain, and turns to face the enemy. Your small squadron of a dozen specialized ships rows out to meet the enemy armada, a single defiant gesture against an overwhelming tide. It feels less like a naval maneuver and more like a ritual sacrifice. The Arab fleet is so vast it has become a new coastline, a floating city of wood and sails that has blotted out the western horizon. As you draw closer, you can make out the details. The brightly colored banners, the glint of sun on the helms of 1,000 warriors lining the decks, their triumphant shouts carrying faintly on the wind. They see you coming. They must think you are insane. Historians still argue whether the Arab commanders believed your tiny squadron was a suicide force sent to make a point, or perhaps a formal delegation coming to offer the city's surrender. Their fleet holds its formation, a great, confident crescent, waiting for you to come to them. It's the casual arrogance of an army that has never known defeat. They are about to get a very loud and very fiery lesson in humility. On your deck, a quiet, purposeful tension takes hold. The captain barks a series of short, sharp commands, and 100 oarsmen below deck pull in perfect, powerful unison, driving your ship forward at a surprising speed. The secretive Siphonario, the keepers of the flame, move to their station at the bow. Their movements are precise, economical, and completely devoid of any wasted motion. They are not soldiers. They are technicians. 2 of them begin to work the large, bronze piston pump. You can hear the squeal of the leather seals and a deep, sloshing, hydraulic sound from within the machine. A 3rd man grips the aiming handle of the great bronze lion's head, swiveling the nozzle to face the lead enemy ship, which is now only a few hundred yards away and bearing down on you fast. A 4th man opens a valve on one of the leather hoses, and you can hear a thick, syrupy liquid gurgling through the pipes. The acrid, chemical smell you noticed in the harbor intensifies, a sharp, resinous odor that stings the back of your throat. The enemy ship is so close now, you can see the faces of the warriors on its deck, their expressions a mixture of confusion and contempt. They have their bows drawn, ready to rain arrows down upon you. They are expecting a conventional fight. They are not prepared for what is about to happen. The captain roars a single word, Pneuma, spirit. The men on the pump throw their full weight into the downstroke. The entire contraption shudders, and with a great, deep-throated, roaring whoosh that sounds like a giant clearing its throat, a thick, black, rope-like stream of liquid erupts from the lion's mouth. It is not on fire. It is just a jet of this oily, foul-smelling syrup, arcing through the air with a horrifying, deliberate slowness. It looks like a stream of liquid tar, and for a split second, you think the whole thing is a ridiculous failure. What are you going to do? Give their ship a new coat of paint. But then, as the stream reaches the apex of its arc, it ignites. There is no match, no torch. No one seems to light it. It simply bursts into a violent, impossible life of its own. This is the central, baffling mystery of Greek fire, the quirky technical detail that still drives modern researchers to distraction. Did it ignite spontaneously upon contact with the air? Was there a second secret chemical mixed in at the last moment? Or was there a flame at the nozzle, obscured by the device itself? You have no idea. All you see is a stream of black liquid leaving your ship and a roaring torrent of orange-green fire arriving at theirs. The liquid inferno strikes the enemy Dramong square in its forecastle. The effect is instantaneous and absolute. The dry, pitch-caulked wood of the ship does not catch fire, it explodes. The great triangular lateen sail vanishes in a flash of incandescent cloth. The warriors on the deck, who a moment ago were poised with their bows, are now just screaming, writhing silhouettes, their bodies coated in a thick, sticky, burning gel that they cannot extinguish. The operator of the siphon pans the nozzle back and forth, and a great, sweeping scythe of liquid flame cuts across the enemy deck. A paintbrush from hell, redecorating a ship in the colors of pure agony. The fire is not a clean, yellow flame. It is a furious, boiling, and almost alive thing, giving off a thick, choking, black smoke that smells of burning pitch and something else, something chemical and deeply wrong. These are the men you're glad you didn't invite to your last barbecue. The roaring sound from the bronze siphon ceases as the operators pause the pump, but the silence it leaves behind is immediately filled by a far more terrible symphony. The world has become a canvas of chaos, and the fire is its only artist. The Arab Dramong, which just a minute ago was a proud and menacing warship, is now a floating pyre, a cage of screaming souls wrapped in an inferno that seems to defy every law of nature. The fire doesn't just burn the wood. It consumes it, melting the pitch between the planks and turning the entire structure into a weeping, flaming wreck. But the true, mind-breaking horror is happening on the water. The burning gobs of the sticky, black liquid that have fallen from the ship's deck are not sinking, and they are not being extinguished. They are floating. A great, shimmering, greasy slick of fire is spreading out from the dying ship like the world's most aggressive and least environmentally friendly oil spill. It's a sight so fundamentally wrong, so contrary to every experience you've ever had, that your brain struggles to accept what your eyes are seeing. Fire and water are meant to be enemies, the ultimate opposites. But this fire, this liquid devil, seems to be fueled by the very thing that should destroy it. It hisses and spits where it touches the waves, creating a cloud of foul-smelling, steamy smoke, but it does not go out. Men, their bodies sheathed in the clinging, burning gel, leap from the decks of the stricken ship, their screams a final desperate prayer for the cool, quenching relief of the sea. But the sea offers no salvation. They plunge into the water and surface again, still burning, their agony only prolonged as they find themselves trapped in a floating field of fire. The water itself has become a trap. A chaos spreads like a contagion through the neat, confident crescent of the Arab fleet. You see men on the nearby ships pointing, their figures frozen in attitudes of pure, uncomprehending shock. Their commanders are shouting orders, but what order do you give in the face of a weapon that seems to have been forged in the pits of hell itself? Their discipline, honed by 100 victories on the deserts of Syria and the plains of Egypt, evaporates. Ships begin to break formation, their oarsmen pulling frantically and erratically to get away from the spreading fire, from their own burning, screaming comrades. They are a fleet in the grip of a collective supernatural terror. This is the true power of Greek fire, a mainstream historical fact that echoes down through the centuries. Its psychological impact was arguably even more devastating than its physical effects. It was a weapon of terror, designed not just to sink ships, but to shatter the morale of an entire navy. On your own deck, there is no cheering. There is only a stunned, awestruck silence. You look at the faces of your fellow soldiers, their eyes wide, their mouths agape, their faces illuminated by the ghastly orange-green glow of the burning sea. You see the same look on every one of them, the profound, bone-deep terror of a man who has just witnessed a miracle and suspects it might be a demonic one. You look at the Siphonario, the operators of the bronze beast. They are not watching the chaos. They are methodically reloading their weapon, their movements calm and practiced, their faces grimly impassive. To them, this is not a miracle. This is a job. The enemy sailors are trying to fight the flames. You can see them throwing buckets of seawater onto the fires that have started on their own decks, ignited by floating, burning debris. It has no effect. The water seems only to anger the fire, making it sputter and spread. You hear a story later, a rumor passed in the barracks, that some sailors tried to smother the flames with sand or heavy cloths, with little success. A quirky and grim tidbit from the chronicles of the era suggests that the only thing that was sometimes effective at extinguishing the clinging fire was a thick layer of sand, followed by a generous dousing of old urine, which is a firefighting technique you're unlikely to see in any modern safety manual. Historians still argue whether the roaring sound reported by chroniclers was caused by the pump mechanism itself, the chemical reaction of the burning liquid, or simply the terrified imaginations of the witnesses. As your ship's siphon roars to life again, unleashing a second sweeping torrent of liquid flame at another enemy vessel, you are certain the sound is a combination of all three. The second ship erupts, a mirror image of the first, its sail vanishing in a flash, its crew consumed by a fire that cannot be quenched. The enemy fleet, which held your squadron, does not press the attack. It doesn't have to. The point has been made in the most spectacular and terrifying way imaginable. As the surviving remnants of the great Arab fleet, now a scattered and panicked mob, limp back towards their anchorage. Further down the coast, your small flotilla of fire ships turns and makes its way back to the safety of the Golden Horn. The victory is absolute, but the mood on your ship is not triumphant. It is a heavy, stunned silence, the silence of men who have stared into the face of a new and terrible kind of war and are not entirely sure if they were on the side of the angels. You spend the next few days in a state of anxious, disbelieving calm. The enemy is still out there, licking its wounds, but they make no move to re-engage. On the city walls, the mood has transformed from one of grim, fatalistic dread to a strange, almost fearful euphoria. You have seen a miracle. You have seen the hand of God himself reach down and smite the invaders with a holy, unquenchable fire. But as you sit in a smoky, crowded tavern in the city's port district, nursing a cup of sour wine, you learn that the hand of God may have had a little help from a Syrian refugee. The whispers start in the corners, low and secretive, the kind of talk that could get a man in a lot of trouble. You are not meant to ask questions about the sea fire, as the soldiers are calling it. You are meant to be grateful for it and to keep your mouth shut. But soldiers always talk, especially when they've seen something that has permanently rewired their understanding of the world. And the name that keeps coming up in these hushed, fearful conversations is Kallinikos. An old, one-eyed veteran at your table, a man who has served in the Imperial Navy for 30 years, is the one who tells you the story. He speaks in a low, rumbling voice, his one good eye scanning the tavern for the ever-present agents of the Emperor's secret police. It is not a gift from God, he rasps, leaning in close, his breath smelling of wine and garlic. It is a gift from a runaway, an alchemist from Heliopolis in Syria. This is the mainstream historical account, the official story that will be passed down through the chronicles. Kallinikos was a Greek-speaking Christian architect and chemist, a subject of the Byzantine Empire, living in a province that had recently been conquered by the Arab Caliphate. Sometime around the year 672, he fled the new regime, making his way as a refugee to the capital, Constantinople. And he did not come empty-handed. He brought with him a secret, a formula, a recipe for a liquid fire the likes of which the world had never seen. It wasn't your typical asylum application. The old soldier tells you how Kallinikos presented his gift to the emperor, Constantine IV. He demonstrated its power, and the emperor, a desperate man facing the annihilation of his empire, immediately recognized its potential. He classified the formula as the highest of state secrets, established a special workshop of chemists to produce it in secret, and created the elite corps of Siphonario to wield it. Historians still argue whether Kallinikos was a single brilliant inventor, a Dark Ages Oppenheimer, if you will, or if he was simply the spokesman for a whole family or guild of chemists who had perfected the recipe over generations. Perhaps the formula wasn't his invention at all, but an ancient secret he had rediscovered, a piece of lost knowledge from the great alchemical schools of Alexandria. The truth is a mystery, buried under the weight of imperial secrecy. A quirky linguistic tidbit is that you and everyone else in Constantinople would never have called it Greek fire. That's a name that would be given to it much later by the Western European Crusaders, who were on the receiving end of its terrifying power. To you, it is pyre-thalician, sea fire, high-ground pyre, liquid fire, or sometimes, in more poetic moments, pyre-Romanian, Roman fire. It is a Roman weapon, the ultimate expression of the empire's ancient and enduring technological genius. You sit back, the sour wine forgotten in your hand. The story is almost more unbelievable than the fire itself. This city, this great 1,000-year-old empire, was saved not by its legions, not by its impenetrable walls, but by the desperate, brilliant mind of a single refugee, a man who carried a recipe for hellfire in his head. The weapon that you witnessed is not just a tool of war. It is the most valuable piece of intellectual property on the planet, a chemical equation worth more than all the gold in the emperor's treasury. And the men who guard that secret, you realize, would not hesitate to kill anyone who asks too many questions about it. You finish your wine, your head swimming with a new and dangerous kind of knowledge, and you decide it would be very wise to keep your mouth shut. Your decision to keep your mouth shut proves to be a wise one, but your newfound status as a veteran of a fireship crew has marked you out. A few weeks after the battle, you are quietly reassigned once more. You are not sent back to the windswept misery of the city walls, nor are you given a place on another warship. Your new post is far stranger and far more secret. You are now a guard, part of an elite detachment assigned to a place that officially does not exist, the Imperial Department of the Seafire. Your workplace is a labyrinth of damp, torch-lit cellars deep beneath the foundations of the great palace itself. The air down here is a permanent, heady cocktail of strange and unsettling smells. It's the place where the devil keeps his chemistry set. The work is mind-numbingly dull and terrifyingly stressful all at once. Your job is to stand perfectly still for 8 hours at a time, your spear held just so, and to make sure that no one who does not have the express written permission of the emperor enters or leaves. The men who work in these cellars, the alchemists and technicians who brew the fire, are a strange, secretive breed. They are pale men who shuffle in and out, their robes stained with unidentifiable chemicals, their faces permanently smudged with soot, and they never, ever make eye contact. But from your silent, unmoving post, you see everything. You see the raw ingredients being brought in under heavy guard in the dead of night. You see the building blocks of the apocalypse, the shopping list for the end of the world, and you finally begin to understand the nature of the devil's recipe. The primary ingredient arrives in large sealed barrels, and the smell that leaks from them is a thick, oily, and deeply unpleasant odor, the smell of the deep earth. This, you learn from the hushed whispers of your fellow guards, is naphtha. It's a form of crude petroleum, a liquid that seeps naturally from the ground in certain parts of the empire, particularly in Mesopotamia and around the Black Sea. This is the mainstream historical consensus. The base of Greek fire was some form of light crude oil or distilled petroleum, giving it its sticky, combustible, and water-resistant properties. Then come the great, rough-spun sacks filled with a sticky, amber-colored substance that smells like a pine forest after a lightning strike. This is resin, collected from the vast pine forests of Anatolia. This is the glue. This is what makes the fire cling, what turns it from a simple flammable liquid into a sticky, burning gel that adheres to wood, to sails, and to human skin. Next, you see men carefully carrying in heavy, canvas-wrapped bricks of a brilliant, almost nauseatingly bright yellow. The air around these bricks hums with the faint, unmistakable smell of brimstone. It is pure, crystalline sulfur. It would not only help the mixture burn hotter and more furiously, but it would also produce that thick, choking, poisonous smoke you saw on the battlefield. A chemical weapon designed to sow terror and confusion. But there is another ingredient, one that seems to make no sense. It arrives in sacks of fine, white powder, looking as harmless as flour. You watch as one of the alchemists, his face covered by a cloth, carefully scoops some of this powder into a large bronze cauldron. A fellow guard, a man who claims his cousin works in the imperial kilns, tells you what it is. It's quicklime, calcium oxide, a substance made by burning limestone at incredibly high temperatures. And this is the part that sounds like pure superstitious madness. The quirky, and still debated, theory is that the quicklime was the secret igniter. On its own, it does nothing. But when it comes in contact with water, it undergoes a violent exothermic reaction, instantly generating a massive amount of heat. The theory goes that as the jet of Greek fire was being sprayed, it was either mixed with water or the operators relied on the sea itself to start the chemical inferno, the quicklime acting as a detonator for the naphtha. Historians and chemists still argue whether there was one single, stable recipe for Greek fire, or if the formula was constantly being tweaked and improved over the centuries, with different additives for different purposes. Was there a specific mixture for use against ship's rigging, and another stickier version for use against personnel? The instruction manual, if it ever existed, has not survived, and it probably didn't come with easy IKEA-style pictograms anyway. You watch the alchemists at their work, their movements slow and deliberate, like priests performing a holy and deeply dangerous ritual. They mix the ingredients in great, heated bronze cauldrons, stirring the thick, black, bubbling concoction with long iron rods. The air becomes thick with noxious fumes, and you understand that the men who make the stuff are sacrificing their own health for the safety of the empire, their lungs slowly being destroyed by the very weapon they are creating. One day, a young apprentice, clumsy in his nervousness, spills a ladleful of the finished product on the stone floor. The reaction is one of pure, frantic panic. The head alchemist, your new life as a cellar guard is a masterclass in the art of doing absolutely nothing while being under the most extreme pressure imaginable. You stand for hours, your back to a cold, damp stone wall, a silent, armored gargoyle in a man-made cave. Your world shrinks to the echo of your own breathing and the shuffle of the alchemist's slippers on the gritty floor. The boredom is a physical thing, a heavy cloak you wear for the entirety of your shift. But underneath the boredom is a constant, low-grade hum of terror. You are guarding not a pile of gold, but an idea, a recipe, and you are slowly beginning to understand that the men who own this recipe are far more afraid of it getting out than they are of any invading army. The commander of your special detachment, a man named Leo, with a face like a clenched fist and eyes that seem to see straight through you, is the one who lays out the new rules of your existence. He doesn't shout like the centurions on the wall. His voice is a low, calm, and utterly chilling whisper. You are no longer a soldier of the empire. He tells you and the other new guards, his voice barely rising above the distant drip of water. You are a priest of the fire. The knowledge in these rooms is a holy sacrament. It is the divine will of God, made manifest in liquid form. This, you learn, is the official story, the state-sanctioned truth. The tale of the Syrian refugee Kalenikos is the one told in the taverns. But in here, in the cold, secret heart of the palace, the legend is far grander. Leo tells you the real story, the one every man in the cellar is expected to believe, or at least pretend to believe with every fiber of his being. The formula for the sea fire, he explains, was not invented by any mortal man. It was delivered by an angel, in a vision, to the first and greatest Christian emperor, Constantine the Great, the founder of this very city. This is the mainstream historical fact, straight from the pen of a future emperor Constantine VII, Porphyrogenitus, who would write in his great book of statecraft, De Administrando Imperio, that this secret was a holy trust, and that any man who dared to betray it to a foreigner would be struck down not just by the laws of the empire, but by the wrath of God himself. Kalenikos was not an inventor, Leo whispers, his eyes boring into yours. He was merely the messenger, the vessel chosen by God to return this holy weapon to the city in its hour of greatest need. His story is a masterpiece of political and religious propaganda. It transforms a brilliant piece of chemical engineering into a sacred relic. The recipe is no longer just a state secret. It's a divine mystery, and you are its guardian. This isn't just a job. It's a religious calling, albeit one with terrible hours and a really unpleasant work environment. And the punishment for betraying this holy trust? Leo spells it out with a calm, surgical precision. It is not a quick, clean execution. First, your eyes would be burned from their sockets with hot irons. Then, your tongue would be cut out, so you could never speak the secret again. Then, you would be sewn into a leather sack with a snake, a rooster, and a monkey, a quirky and horrifyingly specific combination reserved for the worst traitors, and thrown into the Bosphorus. And that, he concludes, is merely what the state will do to you. What God will do to your immortal soul is a matter for the theologians. It's the kind of HR policy that really discourages people from talking at the water cooler. The secrecy is not just a matter of terrifying threats. It is a marvel of practical, paranoid engineering. You notice that the workshops are compartmentalized. The men who handle the sulfur and the quicklime work in one cellar, the men who distill the foul-smelling naphtha work in another, and the final dangerous mixing is done in a third by a master alchemist who is never allowed to leave the palace grounds. It is entirely possible that no single man, apart from the emperor and the head alchemist, actually knows the entire step-by-step process. Historians still argue whether these extreme measures were truly 100% effective. Did the secret ever leak? Arab and Bulgar armies would later try to create their own versions of the weapon, with some limited success. Were these the results of clever espionage and traitors who somehow survived the snake and monkey treatment? Or were they just the product of desperate independent research, a clever attempt to reverse engineer a miracle? You look at the grim, determined faces of your fellow guards, and you suspect that no one here is ever going to talk. You finish your shift and walk out into the bright, noisy streets of Constantinople. The city is a riot of life of merchants, hawking their wares of children, laughing of the everyday, mundane business of a million people who have no idea that their continued existence is being guaranteed by a handful of pale, silent men in a cellar, a divine recipe, and the threat of a very unpleasant death in a sack. Your days as a cellar guard are a slow, creeping education in the architecture of fear. you are no longer just a guard. You are a student, and your unwilling professor is a great, silent beast of bronze that squats in the center of the main workshop. It's a completed siphon, awaiting installation on a new warship, and you have been given the high honor of staring at it for 8 hours a day. It's a bit like being a security guard for a sleeping dragon, and you are under strict orders not to wake it up. From your post against the far wall, you study its every detail. The device is a masterpiece of both engineering and intimidation. It's about 12 feet long from its heavy mounting bracket to the tip of its nozzle, and it is made of thick, cast bronze that has been polished to a dull, menacing sheen. It looks heavy enough to sink a small boat on its own, without even turning it on. The main body is a thick, reinforced cylinder, but it's the nozzle that draws your eye. As you witnessed in the battle, it has been sculpted with an almost insane level of artistry into the roaring, open-mouthed head of a sea serpent, its scales individually detailed, its bronze eyes wide and furious. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement piece. The kind of statement that says, "We have mastered the art of weaponized heartburn, and we are not afraid to use it." This decorative flourish is a well-documented historical fact, mentioned in the writings of the Princess Anna Comnene centuries from now. She would describe these siphons, mounted on the prows of warships, as having the heads of lions and other land animals, designed to be as psychologically terrifying as the fire they spewed. This wasn't just about function. It was about fear. Connected to the main cylinder is a jungle of pipes, valves, and thick leather-wrapped hoses, all bound with bronze fittings. It looks like something you'd get from a flat-pack furniture store, if that store was run by a league of apocalyptic wizards, and the only tool provided was a prayer book. Dominating the rear of the apparatus is the pump, a great double-piston affair with long wooden handles that would require 2 strong, and probably very brave, men to operate. You watch the siphonario as they perform their final checks and maintenance. They move with the quiet, focused intensity of surgeons, their tools laid out neatly on a leather roll. They tap the fittings with small hammers, listening to the ring of the metal. They oil the pump mechanism with a thick, foul-smelling grease. They treat the machine not like a tool, but like a temperamental, living creature that might bite if they make a wrong move. And as you watch, you begin to ponder the central mystery. How does it actually work? You can see the pump, but it doesn't seem powerful enough on its own to project a thick, heavy liquid 100 feet or more. And that's when you notice the other, subtler component. Just behind the pump, connected by a thick armored pipe, is a sealed bronze tank, a sort of pot-bellied cauldron that is reinforced with heavy iron bands. And beneath this tank is a space for a small furnace. This is the heart of one of the leading modern theories about the weapon's function. Historians and engineers still argue whether the liquid was pressurized by the pump alone, or if it was preheated in a sealed bronze cauldron like this one to build up a massive head of pressure before it was ever released. The pump, in this theory, was not just for propulsion, but also to force the liquid into the superheated chamber. The process would be astonishingly dangerous. You would be, in effect, sitting on a giant, boiling kettle of what is essentially medieval napalm. One leaky valve, one cracked seal, and your entire ship would become a spectacular, if brief, floating fireball. The ignition remains the greatest puzzle. You saw it happen, a stream of black liquid that simply burst into flame in midair. The technicians work all around the nozzle, and you can see with your own eyes that there is no pilot light, no furnace, no place for a man to stand with a torch. The secret is inside. Is the story of the quicklime and water true? Or is there some other, even stranger chemical trick at play? A quirky fringe theory, proposed by a few modern scholars, suggests the use of a substance like calcium phosphide, which, when in contact with water, produces phosphine gas, a gas that ignites spontaneously in air. You look at the complex sealed mechanism, and you realize you could stare at it for 1,000 years and never guess its secret. The user manual for this thing was probably just a single word, Don T, written in the blood of the last guy who asked too many questions. The technicians finish their work. With a quiet, shared reverence, they cover the entire apparatus with a heavy, oilcloth tarp, hiding the bronze serpent's head from view. The dragon is being put back to bed. Your shift ends, and you walk out of the cellar, blinking in the sudden sunlight, your mind filled with the terrifying image of that beautiful, deadly, and utterly unknowable machine. Your tenure as the dragon's babysitter, the silent guardian of the great naval siphon, comes to an end. You are not dismissed, but moved. Your commander, Leo, seems to have decided that your silent obedience has earned you a promotion, or at least a lateral move to a different circle of the same well-guarded hell. You are led out of the main workshop and into a smaller, hotter, and even more acrid-smelling cellar, a place that seems to function as the research and development department for the Imperial School of Creative Pyromania. Here, the focus is not on the colossal, ship-killing machines, but on something new, something smaller, more personal. You watch as a single powerfully built Siphonarios stands in the center of a stone-walled testing chamber, a space that is scarred and blackened from previous experiments. And in his hands, he is holding a monster's offspring. It is a cherisiphon, a hand siphon, a portable flamethrower. It's a crude, brutal-looking device about the length of your arm, made of a single bronze tube with a small, piston-like pump at the rear and a simple, unadorned nozzle at the front. A thick, leather-wrapped hose connects it to a bronze tank strapped to the man's back. He looks like a beekeeper from your worst nightmares, one whose bees are made of pure, liquid fire. He aims the nozzle at a target at the far end of the chamber, a thick, wooden shield, the kind your fellow soldiers carry, propped up on a stand. Another technician gives a nod. The operator works the hand pump with a series of short, powerful strokes. There is a familiar, gurgling hiss, and then, with a deafening roar that is shocking in its intensity in this enclosed space, a jet of the thick, black liquid leaps across the room. It ignites in midair, that same terrifying, impossible trick of spontaneous combustion, and strikes the shield. The shield does not smolder. It simply vanishes in a furious, whooshing gout of orange-green fire. The heat, even from 50 feet away, is so intense it makes you flinch, the air in front of you shimmering and warping. It's like standing too close to the world's angriest barbecue, and you are not invited to the party. The operator, for his part, doesn't even blink. Apparently, safety squints had not yet been invented. This is the mainstream historical fact. The Byzantines successfully miniaturized their greatest weapon, adapting it for use by individual soldiers in both land and sea battles. The cherisiphon was a terrifying addition to their arsenal, a way to clear the walls of a besieged city, or to repel boarders on a ship as deck with a terrifying blast of personal, handheld hellfire. But that is not the only project underway in this hot, stinking room. On a long stone table, a line of alchemists are working with a quiet, focused intensity. They are not building machines. They are making pots. Small, clay, earthenware jars, no bigger than a large drinking cup, their surfaces unglazed and rough to the touch. Another group of technicians is carefully ladling the thick, black, syrupy Greek fire into these pots from a heated bronze cauldron. When a pot is full, it is carefully sealed with a thick wax stopper, and a short, grease-soaked fuse of twisted cord is inserted into the top. You are looking at the birth of the hand grenade. These were the other great innovation in fire warfare, small, throwable firebombs that could be lobbed by hand or launched from small catapults. They were, in effect, the medieval equivalent of a Molotov cocktail, but with a far more sophisticated and terrifying chemical payload. Archaeologists have found the remnants of these ceramic grenades all over the former Byzantine world, a quirky and tangible link to this lost technology. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of these land-based fire weapons. Were they as strategically decisive as the great naval siphons, capable of turning the tide of a siege on their own? Or were they primarily psychological weapons, used to create panic and chaos in the enemy ranks? A terrifying sound and light show to break an army's morale before the real fighting even began? You watch as a technician holds up one of the finished grenades. It looks so harmless, like something you'd buy at a local market to store olives in. He then gestures to a crate in the corner, and you see that it's filled with dozens of them, ready to be shipped to some beleaguered garrison on the Danube frontier. A fringe theory, based on some of the more lurid chronicles, suggests that some of these pots weren't just filled with the fire liquid, but were also packed with other unpleasant surprises, like live scorpions or venomous snakes, a nasty bit of biological warfare to complement the chemical kind. It was a complete party in a box, if your idea of a party is a combination of third-degree burns and being attacked by angry reptiles. The technology of the sea fire, you realize, is not static. It is evolving, adapting, becoming more personal, more portable, and in some ways, even more terrifying. The monster is learning new tricks. The world turns. Generations are born, live their lives in the shadow of the great Theodosian walls, and die, their bones turning to dust in the ancient soil of the empire. The fortress on the Danube, where you once stood guard, has been overrun, rebuilt, and overrun again a dozen times. The enemy faces change. Bulgars are replaced by Magyars, who are replaced by Pechenegs. But the city, the queen of cities, endures, and the fire endures with it. It is now the year 941 A.D. You are a different man in a different world. You are not a desperate, conscripted foot soldier. You are Leo, a young, ambitious officer from a good family, a junior commander on a brand new imperial drawing. You have never known the terror of a city on the brink of annihilation. You have grown up in a world where the sea fire is not a new and terrifying secret, but a foundational pillar of your civilization. It is a legend, a bedtime story your grandfather told you, a holy relic that is paraded out on special occasions, a symbol of the emperor's divine mandate and the empire's eternal supremacy. You have never actually seen it used in anger. You are about to get your chance. The new enemy comes from the north, down the great rivers of the land they call Rus. They are a fierce pagan people, a mixture of Vikings and Slavs, and they have come to Constantinople not to conquer it, but to smash it open like a treasure chest. Their fleet is a bizarre and unsettling sight. They are not in great warships like the Arabs, but in a swarm of thousands of small, primitive-looking boats called monoxyla. They are essentially hollowed-out log canoes, nimble and fast, but to your trained naval eye, they look like a joke, a child's fleet of bathtub toys sent to challenge the greatest navy in the world. But their strength is in their numbers. The sea is once again black with them, a chittering, uncountable swarm of water spiders. You are on the deck of your warship, part of the Imperial squadron sent to intercept them. And on your prow, gleaming in the morning sun, is the sacred instrument itself. It is an ancient thing, the bronze polished to a mirror, shined by generations of dedicated technicians. The lion's head at its nozzle seems to snarl with the accumulated fury of centuries. The Siphonario who man it are no longer just secretive soldiers. They are a priesthood. They have their own barracks, their own rites, their own fiercely guarded traditions. Their movements as they prepare the weapon are a liturgy, a series of practiced, ritual gestures passed down from master to apprentice for 300 years. You watch them, a knot of superstitious awe in your stomach. The recipe, you have been taught, is a holy text, its secrets passed down from one emperor to the next at his coronation. A quirky and fascinating theory suggests that over the centuries, The formula may have been subtly refined, tweaked for greater stability or a hotter burn, the way a master chef might perfect a family recipe over generations. The Russ fleet comes on, their warriors banging their shields and roaring their war cries. A wave of pure, untamed ferocity. They have heard the legends of the sea fire, of course, but they are brave, arrogant men. They believe it is a myth, a scare story told to frighten children. They are about to become the punchline in a very old and very fiery joke. The command is given. The liturgy of the fire priests reaches its crescendo. The pump is worked, the nozzle is aimed, and with that same soul-shaking, primordial whoosh that terrified your ancestors, the fire is born again. A great, sweeping torrent of liquid flame arcs across the water and lands amongst the tightly packed swarm of log canoes. The effect is even more devastating than it was against the great Arab warships. The small, light, and tinder-dry monoxyla do not burn. They simply vaporize. They vanish in furious, oily fireballs that leap from one boat to the next, a chain reaction of pure destruction. The warriors, who a moment ago were screaming with battle lust, are now screaming for a different reason. They leap into the sea, but the fire, that ancient, water-hating devil, goes with them, clinging to their leather armor and turning the water around them into a boiling, flaming soup. Historians still argue whether the utter devastation of the Rus fleet in 941, an event led by their Grand Prince Igor of Kiev, was due entirely to the shock and awe of Greek fire, or if the primitive design of their boats and their lack of sophisticated naval tactics made them uniquely vulnerable to such a weapon. As you watch an entire section of their fleet,
the god of fire is not feeling well. 300 years have passed since the great victory over the Rus, and the world has spun itself into a new and more complicated shape. It is now the late 11th century. You are not a soldier or a commander. You are an apprentice, a young man with a good hand for grinding sulfur and a strong stomach for noxious fumes, and your workshop is the same collection of damp, secret cellars beneath the great palace. But the place has changed. The terrifying, sterile efficiency you might have imagined is gone, replaced by the quiet, creeping decay of a great power that is beginning to forget itself. The cellars are crumbling, the mosaics on the floor are cracked, and a persistent, damp chill has seeped into the very stones. The great bronze siphons, once polished to a mirror shine, are now tarnished and neglected, their maintenance schedules clearly a victim of imperial budget cuts. The empire is a shadow of its former self, bleeding territory in the east to the Seljuk Turks and in the west to the Normans. It is an empire under siege, not by a single great fleet, but by 1,000 small cuts, and the sickness of the empire has seeped down into this cellar, into the very heart of its most sacred secret. The master alchemist, a man named Isidore, is a living relic, as ancient and brittle as the scrolls he sometimes consults. He is the last man alive who knows the true original formula for the sea fire. The recipe delivered by the angel to Constantine. The problem is, he is also 100 years old, and his memory is a leaky sieve. The divine secret is no longer a perfect, crystalline thing. It is a collection of half-remembered proportions, mumbled instructions, and frustrated sighs. No, no, you fool, he rasps at you one afternoon, his voice thin and reedy. The naphtha is wrong. It is always wrong these days. He dips a wrinkled finger into a barrel of the thick black liquid, the base ingredient for the fire. This is the thin, greasy filth they get from the Black Sea. It has no soul. This is the mainstream historical fact that has crippled your holy art. The best, purest, most potent petroleum. The median oil, as the old texts call it, came from the great natural seeps in Anatolia. But since the disastrous Battle of Manzikert a decade ago, Anatolia, the heartland of the empire, has been lost to the Turks. The supply chain for your most crucial ingredient has been severed. You are trying to bake the holy bread of God with cheap, second-rate flour. You are forced to make do with substitutes. This is your life's work, trying to patch a divine recipe with mortal, inferior parts. You spend weeks experimenting with different kinds of pine resin, trying to find one that gives the fire its legendary stickiness. You work with sulfur that is full of impurities, which makes the smoke cough and sputter in a way the old texts never described. A quirky and desperate tidbit from your workshop's recent experiments involved trying to increase the fire's potency by adding distilled wine, a potent alcohol, to the mix. The result was a brief, impressive, and almost catastrophic explosion that singed off the master's eyebrows and earned you a week of cleaning the cauldrons. It seems that even when you fail spectacularly to proportions, Isidore mutters to himself one day, staring into a bubbling cauldron of the black mixture. Did my master say 2 parts sulfur to 1 of resin, or was it the other way around? He is the last link in an unbroken oral chain of knowledge that stretches back to Kallinikos himself. There is no master recipe written down in a great golden book. To write it down would be to create a thing that could be stolen. So the knowledge was passed from master to apprentice, a whispered secret in these very cellars.
A god of fire is not feeling well. 300 years have passed since the great victory over the Rus, and the world has spun itself into a new and more complicated shape. It is now the late 11th century. You are not a soldier or a commander. You are an apprentice, a young man with a good hand for grinding sulfur, and a strong stomach for noxious fumes, and your workshop is the same collection of damp, secret cellars beneath the great palace. But the place has changed. The terrifying, sterile efficiency you might have imagined is gone, replaced by the quiet, creeping decay of a great power that is beginning to forget itself. The cellars are crumbling. The mosaics on the floor are cracked, and a persistent, damp chill has seeped into the very stones. The great bronze siphons, once polished to a mirror shine, are now tarnished and neglected, their maintenance schedules clearly a victim of imperial budget cuts. The empire is a shadow of its former self, bleeding territory in the east to the Seljuk Turks, and in the west to the Normans. It is an empire under siege, not by a single great fleet, but by 1,000 small cuts. And the sickness of the empire has seeped down into this cellar, into the very heart of its most sacred secret. The master alchemist, a man named Isidore, is a living relic, as ancient and brittle as the scrolls he sometimes consults. He is the last man alive who knows the true original formula for the sea fire, the recipe delivered by the angel to Constantine. The problem is, he is also 100 years old, and his memory is a leaky sieve. The divine secret is no longer a perfect crystalline thing. It is a collection of half-remembered proportions, mumbled instructions, and frustrated sighs. No, no, you fool. He rasps at you one afternoon, his voice thin and reedy. The naphtha is wrong. It is always wrong these days. He dips a wrinkled finger into a barrel of the thick, black liquid, the base ingredient for the fire. This is the thin, greasy filth they get from the Black Sea. It has no soul. This is the mainstream historical fact that has crippled your holy art. The best, purest, most potent petroleum, the Median oil, as the old texts call it, came from the great natural seeps in Anatolia. But since the disastrous battle of Manzikert a decade ago, Anatolia, the heartland of the empire, has been lost to the Turks. The supply chain for your most crucial ingredient has been severed. You are trying to bake the holy bread of God with cheap second-rate flour. You are forced to make do with substitutes. This is your life's work, trying to patch a divine recipe with mortal, inferior parts. You spend weeks experimenting with different kinds of pine resin, trying to find one that gives the fire its legendary stickiness. You work with sulfur that is full of impurities, which makes the smoke cough and sputter in a way the old texts never described. A quirky and desperate tidbit from your workshop, as recent experiments involved trying to increase the fire's potency by adding distilled wine, a potent alcohol, to the mix. The result was a brief, impressive, and almost catastrophic explosion that singed off the master's eyebrows and earned you a week of cleaning the cauldrons. It seems that even when you fail spectacularly. The proportions. Isidore mutters to himself one day, staring into a bubbling cauldron of the black mixture. Did my master say 2 parts sulfur to 1 of resin, or was it the other way around? He is the last link in an unbroken oral chain of knowledge that stretches back to Kallinikos himself. There is no master recipe written down in a great golden book. To write it down would be to create a thing that could be stolen. So the knowledge was passed from master to apprentice, a whispered secret in these very cellars. But a secret passed down for 400 years is like a story told in a long line. Details get smudged, quantities are forgotten, and crucial steps are omitted. Historians still argue whether the decline in the effectiveness of Greek fire during the later centuries of the empire was due to a degradation of the formula itself, a loss of the secret sauce, or if it was the result of a decline in the quality of the delivery systems and the training of the crews. From your vantage point, covered in soot and smelling faintly of burnt eyebrows, you are certain the problem starts right here, in this pot. The batches you produce are inconsistent. Sometimes the fire burns with the proper, furious orange-green intensity. Other times it is a smoky, sullen, reddish flame that sputters and dies on the water. You are no longer making the wrath of God. You are making a moderately effective, but highly unreliable, incendiary product. The secret is not lost, not yet. But it is fading. It is a dying language, and old Isidore is the last native speaker, and he is forgetting the words. The fire you lit in that forgotten cistern in 1204 did more than just burn a book. It cauterized a wound in history, sealing away a secret so completely that the world would never see its like again. 2.5 centuries of slow, agonizing decline have passed. The great, vibrant empire has withered into a husk of its former self, a city-state clinging to a glorious memory, a living ghost haunted by the specter of its own magnificent past. It is now May, in the year of our Lord 1453. You are not an alchemist. You are a scholar, a clerk in the imperial library, a man of letters and ink-stained fingers, which makes you profoundly useless in the current situation. Because the world is ending. Outside the walls, a new and final enemy has come to extinguish the last flickering flame of Rome. The Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, a young, brilliant, and terrifyingly ambitious man, has laid siege to your city with an army of unimaginable size. And he has brought with him a new kind of fire, a new kind of thunder. From your small, dust-filled room in the palace, you can hear it and feel it every hour of every day. A deep, earth-shaking boom that is not the roar of a siphon, but the bellow of a monster. Mehmed has employed a Hungarian engineer named Orban to build him the largest cannons the world has ever seen. The great bombard, his masterpiece, hurls stone balls weighing over 1,000 pounds at the ancient Theodosian walls, the very walls you once stood upon as a terrified soldier. Each impact is a small earthquake, shaking the dust from your scrolls and the hope from your heart. The walls that held back a dozen armies are being pounded into rubble, not by a secret formula, but by the simple, brutal physics of gunpowder and mass. In this final, desperate hour, the last emperor, Constantine the 11th Palaiologos, a tragic and noble figure, has turned to the ghosts. He has turned to the legends. He has ordered a search. A frantic, hopeless quest through the forgotten corners of the great palace, looking for the one thing that might save them. He is looking for the lost art of the sea fire. And you, with your knowledge of the old texts and the palace's hidden ways, are a part of this search party. You descend into the cellars, the same cellars where the fire was once brewed, but they are not as you remember them. They are a ruin. The great sack of 1204 shattered more than just the empire's power. It shattered its memory, its institutional knowledge. The cellars are now a flooded, rat-infested labyrinth of collapsed tunnels and slime-covered walls. You wade through knee-deep, stagnant water, holding a flickering torch aloft, searching for a secret that you know, in your heart, is already dead. You are looking for a recipe book in a library that has been underwater for 200 years. The futility of your task is a physical weight. You find the old workshops, the bronze cauldrons now green with verdigris, half submerged in the black, still water. You find the remnants of the testing chambers, their walls still scarred and blackened from a fire that the world has forgotten how to make. This is the mainstream historical fact. By the final siege of 1453, the true formula for Greek fire was gone. The Byzantines still possessed some incendiary weapons, a sort of sad, watered-down version of the real thing. But the great, waterproof, spontaneously igniting liquid of the Golden Age was a legend. They had lost the technology that had been their greatest protector. One of your fellow searchers lets out a cry. He has found something in the muck. It is a single sealed clay pot, a fire grenade, identical to the ones you once saw being made. It is the last one, a single 500-year-old spark of hope. The pot is taken with a reverent, almost holy care, back up to the world of the living, a relic from a time when the empire knew how to make its own miracles. A quirky, and ultimately tragic, tidbit is that this last grenade was reportedly used during the final assault, hurled from the walls at the attacking janissaries. It worked. It burst into a terrifying flame. But one grenade against an army of 100,000 is not a defense. It is a gesture. Historians still argue about the precise moment the knowledge was truly lost. Did it vanish entirely in the chaos of 1204, as you witnessed in your past life? Or did a degraded, incomplete version of the formula survive a flickering ember of the old inferno that was passed down until it finally sputtered out from a lack of ingredients, a lack of funds, and a lack of masters who truly understood it? As you stand in the flooded, silent cellar, the boom of Mem's cannon shaking the very foundations of the world, the answer seems clear. The old fire is dead, and a new, louder, and more brutally efficient fire has come to take its place. Your search is over. You have found only ghosts and echoes. You climb back up the stairs. The ashes of your burning book, the last written testament to the sea fire, settle into the cold, stagnant water of the cistern. The city falls. The empire, that great, 1,000-year-old dream of Rome, is extinguished. And the fire, the divine, terrifying secret that was its shield and its soul, is lost to the world. It becomes what it was always destined to be, a legend, a ghost, a mystery. And now you are in a different kind of workshop. It is not a damp, torch-lit cellar beneath a palace, but a bright, clean, modern laboratory filled with the hum of ventilation fans and the precise glassware of a new kind of alchemy. You are a chemist, a historian, a modern-day Kalanikos, and you are trying to raise that ghost. You are trying to reverse engineer a miracle. On your workbench, you have the evidence. You have the detailed, if sometimes contradictory, accounts of the medieval chroniclers. You have the archaeological finds, the scattered clay shards of the fire grenades. And you have the power of modern chemical analysis. The task should be simple, but it is not, because the Byzantines were very, very good at keeping their secrets. The easy part is the base. Everyone agrees on the main ingredients. You can mix the thick, black naphtha, the light crude oil, with the sticky pine resin. You can add the fine, yellow powder of sulfur. This is the mainstream historical consensus, the starting point for every attempt at recreation. You can cook up a batch of this medieval slurry, and what you get is a highly effective, if rather conventional, incendiary. It burns hot, it's sticky, and it's unpleasant. But it is not Greek fire. It does not possess the two magical, almost supernatural properties that made the real thing a legend. First, it does not burn on water. Your mixture, when thrown on a bucket of water, sputters and dies with a sad, greasy hiss. And second, it does not ignite on its own. You have to light your homemade napalm with a match, a simple, logical step that none of the historical accounts, with their talk of a liquid that simply burst into flame, seem to mention. You have made a weapon. You have not made the weapon. And so you descend into the two great enduring mysteries. The first is the propulsion. You study the diagrams of the great bronze siphons. Modern engineers and historians still argue whether they were simple, if powerful, piston pumps, or if they involved the terrifyingly dangerous step of preheating the liquid in a sealed bronze cauldron to build up a head of steam-like pressure. Every attempt to build a working, pressurized model has shown that it is an incredibly effective way to project the liquid, and also an incredibly effective way to create a massive, ship-destroying bomb with the operators at ground zero. The second and greater mystery is the ignition. This is the secret ingredient, the X factor. You experiment with the quicklime theory, adding the fine white powder to your mix. When you add water, it hisses and heats up, as promised. But is it hot enough to reliably ignite a stream of thick, oily petroleum? Your results are inconsistent. A few promising sputters, but mostly just a lot of warm, smelly mud. A quirky and perhaps telling tidbit comes from the world of television, where a popular myth-busting show once tried to recreate the weapon using a simple pump and a nozzle with a hidden flame source like a giant propane torch. They managed to create a spectacular jet of fire, but they had to cheat, admitting that the self-ignition part remained a mystery. And so you are left to wonder, what did they know that we don't? Was there another, more exotic ingredient lost to history? Some scholars have proposed phosphorus, or perhaps a volatile compound like calcium phosphide, which creates a gas that ignites on contact with air. But these were substances that were incredibly difficult to produce and control with medieval technology. Could they have done it? The ghost of the fire offers no clues. You are left with a simple, humbling truth. A group of secretive paranoid and brilliant alchemists working in a damp cellar over 1,000 years. Ogo created a weapon that you, with all the power of modern science at your fingertips, cannot perfectly replicate. The secret is safe. The fire is gone. And now, the quest to understand that ancient, lost fire can come to a gentle end. The images of the laboratory, the bubbling cauldrons, and the great bronze beasts can begin to fade, their hard edges softening into the quiet and comfortable darkness of your own room. The mystery of the formula is no longer your puzzle to solve. The roar of the siphon has been replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing, a quiet and peaceful sound in the night. The fire, which once burned so brightly on the dark waters of the past, has been safely extinguished, leaving behind only the gentle, fading warmth of a story that has now been told. Let the last embers of that tale die down, and allow the cool, calm, and quiet tide of sleep to wash over you, carrying you into a deep and dreamless rest.